A new David Cronenberg film is always a cause for celebration, especially now, being he is an 82-year-old man 55 years into his filmmaking career, and it brings me great joy to report that his latest, The Shrouds, is yet another tremendous late-period work from the master of body horror. But that oft-used title leaves out an underappreciated aspect of his work, one that his latest film is deeply concerned with, much more than, say, any gross-outs or genre filmmaking trademarks. And that is his confrontation with the most primal human emotions. The deeply personal starting point for this film in particular, The Shrouds, is grief, something lingering close in Cronenberg's mind during the making of this film, as in 2017 he lost his wife of 43 years after a battle with cancer. This is not to say that The Shrouds is now something more overtly sentimental or maudlin than what you might expect from the one-of-a-kind Canadian auteur. The Shrouds is still distinctly Cronenbergian through and through, but it is a more overt self-reflection than anything I've ever seen from him, and I think that's what makes it one of his most fascinating late-period works to date. At the center of Cronenberg's latest beguiling concoction of sex, death, and surveillance is a miraculous innovation in the burial business. As always, we find Cronenberg's central character navigating a deep-seated fixation with the human body, but for this go-around, the bodies are those of whom are no longer living. Vincent Cassel plays Karsh, who has been made up to look like a dead ringer for Cronenberg himself. These two are of course reuniting after Cassel delivered a memorable supporting turn in 2007's Eastern Promises. But here, Cassel plays a man so obsessed with his now-deceased wife's body that he's pioneered a new technology called Shroud Cam, which allows one to watch a live feed of their loved one lying in their coffin, given the opportunity to witness their decomposing body straight from a monitor built into headstones, of which you are then able to operate right from your cell phone. It's an outlandish premise that Cronenberg, as is apparent within the opening moments, finds just as outlandish as we do, in that characteristically droll Cronenbergian fashion. As the film opens with Karsh in the throes of a nightmare about his wife, looking at her and screaming, a scene which then hard cuts to gloriously gonzo effect to Karsh lounged back in a dentist chair, his mouth wide open, with the dentist remarking that grief is rotting his teeth. Just like Cronenberg himself, Karsh lost his wife, Becca, who is played here by Diane Kruger in what is her best performance in a really long time, to cancer years prior to the inception of this new project. He's created a cemetery in Toronto to test out his new technologies, where his late wife now rests within one of these very graves. So this guy is clearly having a hard time dealing with his wife's death. But beyond the film's central concern of learning how to move on from the death of a loved one, a spouse, there are some fun, admittedly convoluted genre film elements that unspool when an international conspiracy comes into the fold, following the vandalization and data looting of Karsh's prototype cemetery. Alongside that, there are some surrounding, rather complicated personal affairs with his wife's identical twin sister, his tech-savvy brother-in-law, played by an eccentric Guy Pearce, and a woman he's currently seeing, played by Sandrine Holt, that all build around the conspiratorial mystery at the center. These admittedly goofy moments act as a reprieve to, or a sidetrack from, the tech's deep emotional throughline, but they can also be seen as a rather direct representation of the obsessional, delusional thinking that stems from an unfathomable loss. In Karsh's many fantasies throughout the film, we find him imagining, desiring his wife's body when it was in a state of utter decay. Becca enters his dreams as an amputee, scars covering every inch of her body, her bones breaking with even the gentlest of touches. He's been able to find some form of intimacy with his wife only in fantasies, able to see and feel her touch in the dream state. However, Karsh has not successfully found an escape from the grieving process itself, despite his many attempts at it. He's perhaps only made the process more arduous for himself, afraid to actually come to terms with the fact that his innovation to meet the dead head-on may not be as beneficial an act as it was initially conceived to be. This really feels like Cronenberg wrestling with a deep loss in the only way he knows how to, within the language of cinema and with the familiar framework of body horror and dystopia. Cronenberg has forever used that creative freedom genre filmmaking allows to liberate our very limited imaginations, to feel for the macabre, to embrace the unsettling and unfamiliar. And with The Shrouds, it's grieving through a screen. It's the bodies of our deceased loved ones readily available to observe on our cell phones, all told with that late-style Cronenberg sterilized, disquieting style of filmmaking. While this new one is far more talky and small-scale than even his previous effort, Crimes of the Future, was, it reflects an aging Cronenberg's natural shift in his style into something less concerned with the grotesqueness of bodily obsession, and now more preoccupied by the romanticism inherent in it. The Shrouds really finds him at his most composed, where the provocations aren't near as noisy and are now nestled in what is more or less a love story, one as bewildering and yet strangely moving as they come. At a time when so many filmmakers are seeing success riffing on his style, namely and most recently Julia Ducournau and Coralie Farjat, who I both love by the way, it's just nice to have the real deal Cronenberg himself come back every now and again, because nothing hits like a Cronenberg film does. And I hope he has many more left in the tank for us.